What I'd like to do now is give you a little bit more detail about how the command processor pattern is applied in Android. And this is going to be somewhat a review, but we're just going to look a little bit more in terms of the steps involved and kind of map this from the pattern onto what's in Android. And it'll also give you a chance to see another visualization of how these things work. So the implementation steps, sort of step number one is to define an abstract class that will give you the interface for passing commands. In many environments, you have some kind of execute method that you're going to use to do the work. In Android, it doesn't quite work that way, but it's along those lines. There's an intent, and the intent is parcelable, which means you can turn it into something that can be sent across a network and reconstituted on the other, or across the processes between different processes on Android, and then reconstituted on the other side. We then have the need to be able to add state, so you can pass information, data, along with the command. In many cases, that's used by subclassing from a command interface and filling in a bunch of fields to do the bidding of the subclass. In the context of Android, it's a little different, but it's along the same sort of lines. We have a bunch of operations to set data and get data, which work on URIs, as well as to be able to put extras and get extras to be able to work on other kinds of data, strings, ints, bundles, things like that. We also then have to define and implement the creator, the thing that actually creates the stuff that we're going to use with the commands. So in our particular case, that's typically done by an activity where we might have some kind of click handler, which when you click on it, will go ahead and make an intent connected either implicitly or explicitly to some kind of service or other component. And then you stuff the various extras into the intent, and then you call start service, which, as we've seen, doesn't block. We then have to define the context. In this particular case, we'll just grab the context that we get from the Android context, which on the activity side of the world gives you operations to do a whole bunch of things. On the service side of the world, gives you some other things. You can do things like send broadcasts or be able to register receivers for broadcasts, start activities, start services, and so on and so forth. Those are various things you can do in the context. And then the final thing, of course, is to implement specific command functionality in subclasses. So in the context of our pattern implementation in Android, what that's going to relate to is inheriting from intent service and then filling in the on-handle intent hook method, which, as you all know, when it gets called back, will be running in a separate thread of control. Here's another way to look at this stuff. This is how this might be applied in the context of your programming assignment. So we might have a download activity process, which has a download activity. And let's assume we're using the messenger variant of things here. And we go ahead and send the service to the activity manager service. It starts up this particular thing. And the intent service will then, on-handle intent method, will go ahead and grab that information and then reply back to the messenger. As you can see in this particular case, the service connection portion is not used. So I'm going to go ahead and just zap that from the picture here. We'll talk about this in just a second when we start talking about bounded services, because they end up actually using this kind of stuff. Here's a little bit of the code just to illustrate this. So you can see we go ahead and create an intent, put some information into the intent. And here's the receiver. We go ahead, in this particular case, get the bundle of extras out of the intent, go ahead and look up the URI, get that back, and then we go ahead and get the messenger that was also bundled in there, download the file, and then send the messenger back to the client. OK, so that's basically the coverage of the intent service. Are there any questions about any of that stuff?